Life has been almost predictable and too comfortable for the past few years. Hannah and I have been married for 6 years now, and although our relationship is not perfect, I believe we are in a good place. Work often leaves me buried under deadlines, and her constant socializing can sometimes make me nervous, but we have our own rhythm. I thought Saturday nights were usually ours, and we had an unwritten agreement to make time for each other. But last weekend, she insisted on attending a party thrown by one of her work friends. "Jack, it's no big deal," she said, reassuring me like a child. "It's just a casual get-together, you should come, it'll be fun." The word fun hung in the air like a promise that I knew she couldn't keep, but I agreed anyway. I told myself I'd support her, but lately I felt something was wrong. Hannah kept staring at her phone, smiling at text messages she never shared with me. Whenever I asked who it was, she gave vague answers, just saying it was Emma. She waved dismissively or said it was work. When we arrived at the party, she disappeared almost immediately into the crowd. Hannah had always been a social butterfly, her laughter flying around the room like a melody above the clinking of glasses and the noise of chatter. I stayed in the kitchen, drinking a beer and watching her from afar. There was something about her that felt different. It wasn't just the way she interacted with people, it was the way she looked around, as if she was looking for someone, before she slipped outside. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the unease churning in my chest wouldn't let me settle down. So I followed her outside. The cool night air hit me as I stepped onto the terrace, and strings of colored lights softly illuminated the backyard. Laughter rippled out from the scattered crowd on the lawn, but Hannah wasn't among them. Then I heard her low, intimate laughter coming from the far end of the yard, and that's when I saw her, my wife standing with a man I didn't know. I didn't know them. They were standing too close together for it to be innocent. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, his arm casually around her waist. They leaned in close, heads close together. Sharing such an intimate moment, it felt like I had intruded. And then they kissed. The world froze. My heart pounded against my ribs. I stood there, motionless. Time seemed to warp. The bottle of beer in my hand slipped and fell silently to the ground. The sound broke the spell. Hannah's eyes darted around until they landed on mine. We stared at each other for a moment, her face pale with shock, mine contorted with anger. The man glanced between us, confused, but I didn't wait for an explanation. I turned and walked back inside, my chest burning, my mind full of questions. I wasn't ready to face Hannah. She didn't come home that night, and the next morning she finally returned, as if she had aged overnight, her makeup smudged, her eyes red and puffy from crying for hours. She stood on the porch, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. "Jake," she began, her voice shaking, "please let me explain." Explain, as if there was some explanation that would justify what I'd done. But I didn't slam the door, at least not yet. I stepped aside and motioned for her to come into the living room. The living room was a mess, with an empty whiskey bottle on the coffee table and the glasses where I'd left them. She hesitated, taking in the scene, but I made no move to show that I cared about her discomfort. "Sit down," I said, my voice colder than I'd intended. I meant it. And she sat down on the edge of the sofa like a child who'd made a mistake and was waiting for punishment. I stood in front of her, arms crossed, looking down at her. The silence became unbearable, charged with unspoken accusations. Finally, I broke the silence. "Who is he?" She looked up sharply, her eyes wide as if she hadn't expected me to come right to the point. "Jack, it's not what you think. Don't interrupt." My voice was sharp enough to make her flinch. "Don't you dare tell me it's not what I think it is. I was there, Hannah. I saw you." Her face crumpled. For a moment I thought she was going to confess, but instead she buried her face in her hands and began to sob. The noise disturbed me. "Stop crying. I'm not the victim here. I want answers. Who is he? How long has this been going on? Why do you think you can treat me like this?" She lowered her hands, her face streaked with tears and snot. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "His name is Brandon. He works with me." I let out a bitter laugh. "Of course. The cliché of the office romance." She winces. "How long has it been going on?" I ask. Her hesitation is brief, but telling. "A few months," she admits in a voice so soft I almost don't hear it. "A few months of lies. A few months of sneaking around while I work overtime, thinking I'm building a life for us." "It's not like that," she cries. "It doesn't mean anything, Jack, I swear. It was a mistake. I don't even know why. It was a mistake to interrupt the dinner that was burning. It was a mistake to forget the anniversary. It was a choice she made over and over again. Do you dare belittle it? Her sobs grew louder and louder, and for the first time I felt a sense of satisfaction. Good, let her feel what she's done. Now what? She whispered, her voice trembling. I stared at her. The woman thought I knew. Realizing I had no answers, our lives, our future, all felt shattered beyond repair. You're packing your bags, I said, my voice firm. You're leaving. Her head shot up, her eyes wide with panic. Jack, please don't do this. I raised my hand to interrupt her. I need time to think. Now I'm not even going to look at you. She opens her mouth to argue, but then decides against it. Without another word, she gets up and heads for the bedroom. The sound of her packing her suitcase is muffled through the walls. When she finally leaves the house, I stay where I am, motionless. The silence in the house is more deafening than ever. After Hannah leaves, the silence in the house is deafening. This is not the kind of silence you get when you're alone in contentment. No. It was a suffocating hum. The silence echoed with everything I didn't want to think about. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, as the events of the previous night played over and over in my mind like a cruel, endless echo of laughter in the backyard. Brandon's hands on her waist, their lips touching as if I'm not there. By noon, the weight of the silence becomes unbearable. I pick up my phone and scroll through my contacts until I find Ryan's name. Ryan, my best friend since high school, the only one who can keep me from falling apart when I fall apart at the feet. Jake, how are you? Ryan answered the phone after 2 rings. His voice was casual, as if it were just another Saturday. She's gone. I said the words with finality, tasting them strange and bitter as they left my mouth. There was a pause on the line. Gone. Wait, what happened? Did you have a fight? She cheated on me. I said it, my voice emotionless, and she ran off with some guy from the office. I kicked her out this morning. Ryan muttered an expletive under his breath. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Do you want me to come over for a bit? I thought about it for a moment and said no. I wasn't sure I was ready to talk about it, or if I could put it into words, but the thought of sitting at home alone for another hour made my chest tighten. Yes, I finally spoke. Half an hour later, Ryan appeared, a 6-pack of beer in one hand and a bag of chips in the other. He didn't say anything, just nodded at me and sat down on the sofa next to me. We opened the beer and sat in silence for a while. Not the suffocating silence before, but a relaxed silence, like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Ryan finally broke the silence and said, Do you want to tell me what happened? I ran my hand through my hair. I saw her outside at the party last night with a guy, and I saw them kissing. Ryan let out a low whistle. Is she trying to deny it? No chance, I bitterly reply. I left before she could say anything. She came home crying this morning, begging me to explain. But what's there to explain? It's fucked up. I don't even know what to say. Yes, I mumble. We sit in silence again, the TV whirring in the background. I could feel Ryan watching me out of the corner of his eye, waiting for me to break down or tell more of the story. But I didn't. I couldn't. What are you going to do? He finally asked. I don't know, I admitted. I let her go, but everything feels unresolved. 7 years. 7 years. And that's how it ends. It doesn't have to end like this, Ryan said carefully. I'm not saying you should forgive her, but people make mistakes and maybe there's something to salvage. I shook my head. Anger welled up again. Forgetting my birthday was a mistake. The burnt dinner was a mistake. This was not a mistake. This was a choice she made again and again. Ryan didn't argue, just nodded and took another sip of his beer. After Ryan left, I was left alone in the living room, staring at the wedding photo on the mantelpiece. Hannah's smile was so genuine, her eyes full of love and commitment, and now it felt like a cruel joke, a snapshot of a time that no longer existed. I grabbed the frame and turned it upside down, and the next morning it hit me like a freight train. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and Brandon laughing and playing in the yard, kissing at noon. I decided I couldn't just sit there, wallowing in my misery. Hannah's laptop sat on the table in our shared office, its screen dark and innocent. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, hesitant. What was I really looking for? Answers? Evidence? A confession? Deep down I hoped to find something that could still be salvaged somehow. But I didn't. Her emails were the first crumbs, hidden in folders labeled with work projects. My stomach churned as I read them last night. Find a way to see you soon. The lies she had told me were written in black and white. A plan to meet at the hotel, with the excuse of working late. Then I found her diary. It was buried in the drawer of her bedside table, unopened, with its leather cover. I leafed through it, and when I came to today's entry, my heart sank. I saw him again today, Brandon. Being with him makes me feel alive, but the guilt was unbearable. Jake doesn't deserve this. I don't know what's wrong with me, why I can't stop. The words stuck in my throat like a piece of broken glass. She felt alive when she was with him, and it made me feel like a passenger. Going through everything, the emails, the texts, the receipts from their secret rendezvous, it was all there, the evidence of betrayal as neat as a catalog, and she didn't even care if I found it. That night, Hannah texted me. Her message was desperate. "Jack, can we talk?" My response was curt. "Not now. I need time to process, to think." But one thing was clear, I would not let her avoid the consequences. Everything I had uncovered weighed between us. The coffee table was piled high with the damning evidence, her emails, her calendar, her diary. When I confronted her, she burst into uncontrollable sobs, covering her face with her hands, her shoulders heaving with her rapid breathing. Why did I insist on an answer despite my efforts to remain calm? Why? Isn't that enough for you? Her voice was muffled by her hands as she choked out her response. It's not about you. I know it sounds like a shirking of responsibility, but it's the truth. I don't know. Losing my mind. Stupid. I made a mistake. The word mistake made my blood boil. I grabbed the diary off the table and threw it down again with force. The sound echoed through the tense silence. Mistake again. That's what you keep calling it, as if it were an accident, as if. Not every time. Her sobs grew louder and more desperate. But I felt nothing. No pity, no compassion. Only a cold, empty numbness that had gripped me since the night I caught her on the act. I hadn't expected things to turn out like this. She whispered, almost inaudibly. But it was true, I answered sharply. Now you must face the consequences. Hannah looked up at me, her face a picture of pain, her eyes red and puffy, pleading for forgiveness without saying a word. She asked what would happen now, her voice trembling. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything else, and felt a heavy moment envelop me. This is the end, there is no turning back. What now? I said slowly, my voice steady but cold. We're finished, I'm filing for divorce. Hannah, you can pack your things and leave, this is no longer your home. She heard my words and her face contorted as tears slid down her cheeks. She shook her head, rejecting my demands. Jack, please don't do this. I can make it up to you. I'll do anything. Just give up on us. You had your chance, I said, cutting off her last hope and silencing her. You had your chance, but you threw it away. Now you have to live with the consequences. She stayed for another hour, pleading for forgiveness and begging for another chance, but I wavered. I had made up my mind, and there was no going back. When she finally walked out the door with her suitcase, the pressure in my chest eased slightly for the first time. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The life we had built together was gone, broken into irreparable pieces. But I was still standing, and that was enough for now.